Thank you, Lisa. And it's a treat to be here talking about this. I've been covering metrics and ratings and research my entire career for like 40 years, because it didn't take me long when I started covering TV in the 80s to understand that we don't actually buy TV commercials or programs or households or people. We buy these things called impressions, or in those days we called them GRPs. And that was really the trading currency. It's what the guarantees were against. It's what people posted off of. It's what make goods, audience adjustment units, et cetera. So when we made the transition to digital, it took me a long time to understand what people were actually buying when I described these things called uniques. And especially now that we're getting into this period where we're looking at cross-platform and even having a hard time defining what, OTT and television or video or the hybrid thereof is. And I do think the underlying metrics and currency are vital to that. Probably not going to go into it in this conversation, but if we have an opportunity, I do want to talk a little bit about what the Media Rating Council has been up to and the efforts to create a true underlying denominator so that we can all talk collectively about this. But what we have here are not really research experts per se. These are the, where the tire hits the road, investment managers, right? But you have to work with these currencies in order to do your business and to deliver your ROI for your clients. So if you don't mind, I'd just like to start off with Julie and Brad both, take your turns and just introduce yourself, but talk a little bit about how you view the role specifically of OTT metrics, how you define them in your organization, how you apply them. Just give us a little snapshot and feel for what you use to do business with OTT providers.
I'm Julie Anson. I lead investment strategy and partnerships at Magna specifically for advanced advertising. So anything that looks like advanced TV, ACR, data-driven linear, addressable, and OTT. We kind of look at it on a client, it'll have to be on a client basis. I always say for a lot of larger TV clients, we use Nielsen DAR as currency, and pretty much a deal breaker for OTT partners who really can't transact on that. It cuts a lot of investment opportunity from us, just because the best way to get the investment out of linear is to make it look like linear. And then on a client basis, for clients who have shifted away from HX demos into strategic targets, they of course are buying on households or impression level. So it really just depends on the brand and the KPI of the campaign. But those are really, okay. I would think they're anyone's two metrics.
You're absolutely right. And I'm Brad Liebow. I manage all the media buying for Spark Foundry. Is this on or?
Yeah,
right.
Just talk into it.
Better. So I manage all the media buying for Spark Foundry in New York. It's we're kind of in another golden age, and I think you started to talk about that in terms of just the proliferation of the amount of opportunities in the marketplace right now and the fragmentation of where the consumer is. And the challenge that we have for many advertisers, particularly legacy advertisers who have bought traditional television for a long time, is finding those audiences in different places. Because fragmentation is continuing, there are many OTT and CTV opportunities in the market that we can move towards, but the challenge is measurement. And how do you find that consistent measurement across everything? And right now, it doesn't really exist. There's opportunities out there and things being worked on from a cross-platform perspective, but we kind of Frankenstein, pull it all together, and it's a really challenging piece, but it all depends, and Julie's right, it all depends on the brand's KPIs. And the market is so dynamic right now, you can, many of these folks you can use for deeper targeting and things like what we just talked about with Matt from an Amazon perspective, or you can just drive reach, and we've talked about that as well. So it's an exciting time in the market, in the space.
I like that Frankenstein of media measurement. So, Julie said something that struck me about that line of if you want to get the money from linear, make it look like linear. It's funny how we compartmentalize all of these things into these little areas. I mean, performance marketing existed on television long before digital. We called it direct response TV, and they were using completely different KPIs like sales, correlating it to phone numbers and other location data they had. So this is not new. But even back in those days, those DR response advertisers were looking at TV in a completely different way than a brand marketer was. So in a way, it's no different. It's just more fragmented and complicated. But at least back then, we had this common currency, this underlying root, this thing called the Nielsen GRP. You don't have that today, so you have to create Frankenstein-like things. Maybe what would be interesting now is if you could talk a little bit about, by the way, these two agencies here are part of two holding companies, Publicis and Interpublic. They represent about a third of all advertising spending, so that's a lot of money here. Why don't you talk a little bit about what Magna has created to make it easier for you as a investment manager to go to market, the calculator concept?
Shut up, Molly. Yeah, we have invested a lot in, we've invested a lot in internal tools to try and shift and make recommendations and directional recommendations for how much to shift out of linear into OTT. So we have, we bought a small company called Axiom. We have internal reach curve tools, and we did what Joe's referencing. We built an OTT calculator, and the reason Molly, who works with me at Magna, laughed is because it's actually just an Excel chart, and it's very, very basic. And you type in your linear investment, your campaign. You just basically type in some very, very simple information, and it kicks out how much of your investment should go over there. But again, it's better than nothing, and it's just helping these teams show their clients that they're using some level of intelligence to make a recommendation, because on a Magna level, we try to at least just use consumption or market share, shift 25% of your budget over, and it's just not one size fits all. So trying to invest in these internal tools, and even as something as simple as this Excel-based calculator, is allowing teams to at least take the information and then apply it to their own targets and KPIs and budgets and flights. It's hard. I mean, even just after the shift to OTT, that's step one, but then it's, once you get there, what do you do? So if it's consumption-based to get there, then it's market share-based once you're there. How much goes to Roku? How much goes to Amazon? And that, just 5 minutes ago, Roku bought DataZoo. So that changed before I walked on stage. So we sit with meetings with, I think someone said it yesterday, every service, platform, device, DSP, SSP, VMVPD, every partner, every AVOD, SVOD, TVOD, all day long. And we will write a POV about Roku and DataZoo in 10 minutes. So, I'm sure you have a similar experience.
And we do. And again, the calculators I think are great. I'd love to kind of figure some of that stuff out myself in terms of what's the best way to define your investment between either linear or OTT. But I continue to go back to the fact that it's really about the KPIs. The media is so dynamic these days, and the opportunities, particularly in television from a TV attribution standpoint, is really interesting. So from our perspective, and what I work with the teams on is just follow the audience, and it's really about the audience, and then try to vet each partner to deliver, depending on the KPI, the metrics we're trying to deliver. So that metric could be, if you're trying to deliver reach, how do we make sure we make it look like TV? And do some of these, these OTT partners and CTV partners have the capabilities to do that? Because, I always kind of say fish where the fish are. You kind of alluded to this a little bit as well. The most of the money sits, we talked about it yesterday, $70 billion sits in television up front. I think, what did we say yesterday? 13 billion of it, or 13 billion is CTV or OTT. And that does not demonstrate the kind of the fragmentation appropriately. So,
Okay. Well, let's not wait 10 minutes for Interpublic's Magna's POV analysis. Let's talk about Roku DataZoo. I just heard about it myself. I guess they spent $150 million for DataZoo. Let's think about what that means and get a live extemporaneous reaction on it. Because Roku already had built their whole audience segmentation infrastructure out. My first question is why do they need DataZoo and why do they need $150 million to do that? I know DataZoo had moved aggressively into audience segmentation for connected and OTT. But my real question is, why do we need all of these piecemeal solutions? Don't we need a unified view of this universe like we have with TV? And is this a good thing for suppliers to be creating their own little walled gardens? Yeah, you said it.
I don't think it's good for anyone to make a walled garden. And as buyers, you all are, and there's nothing we can do about it. This was a clear step towards becoming an Amazon who has their own DSP, a Xandr who has their own DSP, an Ampersand who will one day have their own DSP. So Roku would tell you this is providing a unified look, because really what Roku's doing is buying a data graph that is actually wonderful. It is a wonderful data graph. It's valuable. It's a repository of 7 data graphs layered on top of each other. It really is good. But the beauty of it is planning off of linear. So what Roku is claiming is, well, will claim, is that it is doing that. It's giving you a holistic view so you can plan your linear, plan your OTT off of it. And if they really are keeping DataZoo as DataZoo currently is, you'll in theory be able to buy non-Roku OTT from Roku. So they will be telling you that it is holistic, even though the agency approach is going to ask us for $400 million to do it. So it's great on the Roku perspective. It's a serious investment in really good data, but it creates more walled gardens for us, as opposed to really starting to bring it.
Right.
I mean, just as we bring it all together, it kind of blows up.
So let's think about the consequence of that. We didn't, as an industry, choose to get 2 dominant digital, or 3 today with Amazon suppliers. It happened because they achieved critical mass and they solved the solution. And you don't have the leverage, frankly, to go behind that and find out who the respondent data are. But right now, with the emerging OTT and connected TV universe, you have a lot more leverage. You have all the budgets. Not that you could disallow that. I mean, that would be antitrust. But if you lean into that and support it, don't you then let a platform become dominant?
Yeah, to an extent, and I think that to the point about walled gardens, we really need to figure out ways to open those up, and I'm trying to remember. I'm drawing a blank, but the coalition that came together with NBC and
OpenAP.
OpenAP. And how do you start to think about how some of these groups come together a little bit differently? Because it's going to benefit everybody. It's going to open up the opportunities for transparency, which is going to be really important, into the things that we're buying, the things that our clients are buying, and then, frankly, open up the opportunity for stronger and better optimization amongst all of the platforms. And those with the right audiences long-term will be those who are going to move forward and win.
And the funny thing is the platforms are actually the partners that can break the walls down. So it is ironic that when companies buy those platforms up, they're in theory removing the beauty of a platform. The beauty of a DataZoo is that they're agnostic. They're not agnostic anymore, which is again, it's a really good step for Roku, but it removes from the buy side the purpose of a platform.
Well, they're agnostic to the extent that they're pushing you towards inventories that they participate in. They don't send you to places they don't measure or enable, right? The OpenAP is a good example. I mean, it started out as the supply side thing to create a harmonized or holistic view of audience segments across all these new TV digital audience segments. But it was a supply side solution. I don't know why it's not coming from the demand side. We have 3MS, which is the 4As and the ANA and the ARF's initiatives. Why isn't there not a demand side, you guys who are the pocketbooks, coming and saying this is how it should be done? And I know maybe it's an antitrust thing, but in other countries we have these things called JICs, which are joint industry committees, and there's been suggestions to do that here in the U.S. Over the years, Nielsen's pushed back on that, ironically calling it antitrust. But it seems like that's the way to do it in Canada or Europe, even in Asia. The whole industry gets together, sets the parameters for how the audience should be defined, puts out RFPs for suppliers to go out and measure it, and then they all agree on it. And if the suppliers don't deliver, they change the structure of it. But they're all agreeing on the same common currency. How come we don't do that here? This seems like a simple solution.
I mean, I would agree. I would agree, and I don't know why it hasn't you know, really manifested itself here. Maybe you're right. Maybe there is some antitrust issues within it and legal issues, but at the end of the day, you know, what we're trying to do as major, you know, global holding companies in lots of cases, is also try to buy into, like Axiom you mentioned, or Publicis just bought Epsilon for, you know, for a little bit of money, and you know, how can we start to bring some of that in-house, understand the data application, and look at it in a more agnostic way across the market. But I agree, it would be great to have a space and a place, and maybe one exists that provides that opportunity.
I mean, there are a few of them. I feel like there are a lot of consortiums and councils and there are a lot of them. I just think there's a lot of lack of actionable items as opposed to sitting around and kind of talking about the same issues in a circle. I think OpenAP went to market without buy side. Project OR is including the buy side. Nielsen even actually included the buy side in the past year. We all sat with Kelly, and whether they listen, I don't know, but they talked. We talked. You know, we always give feedback. It's not actually our decision and last call to decide whether or not to apply the feedback to a product's roadmap.
I mean, here's the hard truth. I don't know what it is today, but back in the day when I was really covering Nielsen, 97% of their revenue came from suppliers. About 3% came from the ad industry. I think they've grown that a lot, put aside their marketing data. I'm talking about media measurement. So yes, they play lip service and they kowtow. You're the exalted rulers above everything. But the reality is that the methods are being defined by their paying stakeholders to a more extent. So this would be a good time to talk a little bit about the concept of currency and what the MRC is doing. And neither of you are experts on this, nor am I really, but I think it's a valid thing to bring up right now, because what I learned early on is a currency is not MRC accreditation or a Nielsen GRP. It is what two sides of a marketplace agree to do business on. And, you know, for a few years now, we've been doing business for local TV ratings with an unaccredited service from Nielsen, because two sides of the business agreed that that's what you'd post and do business on. The problem with what we're in right now with OTT and connected TV is we have lots of different ways of defining that. You yourselves in your preamble describe this as, you know, it depends on the KPI that your customers are doing. So we're kind of in this Babel-like era of measurement. How do you do business when everything is piecemeal, where you have your own proprietary solutions and your suppliers do? You've spent, what, $3 billion for Axiom, Epsilon, you know, all of these companies are all designed to give you a proprietary edge. How do you create a common currency that everybody can agree to and go to market?
It's a tough one.
I know, in my head I'm saying we don't. Again, we honestly just use impressions or Nielsen DAR, and that is it. I mean, OTT, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but you don't have to transact on viewability. You don't have to transact on click-throughs. You don't have to transact on completion rates, because it is on the TV full screen, non-skippable. So that kind of wipes out, when I'm negotiating terms with all the OTT partners, we actually X out those entire paragraphs out of IAB, and it doesn't apply.
So you use the same rules as linear TV.
Pretty much, and the MRC is not perfect, but taking a step at least towards making a commonality. I mean, from our perspective, we at least just need to define what an impression is. That's all, because we're buying on impressions, but even just in linear addressable, you have an ad start, 5 seconds, 15 seconds. So that is actually the baseline that we need to figure out. MRC is very focused on the audio component of it. I just reread the article this morning because I had a feeling you'd ask. The audio component, I feel like for us,
yeah,
I just want to know what an impression is.
If you're buying an audio-video campaign delivery and the silent is on, you want to pay for that?
Well, NBC is making a commercial where the video is off. So
Well, that's a strategy, though.
totally
Right.
a strategy.
You're
I'm
buying
just
it,
saying,
yeah.
I think the first step is to at least understand what the impression is, and then apply all of these layers of completion and what audio means in OTT. But it's better than nothing, and it's definitely a step in the right direction, for sure. It at least starts the conversation, and it progresses it forward.
Okay. Well, I'd like to come back to that, but I think this other issue you both touched on is really important to get into, which is the concept of higher order KPIs, right? So we'll all agree there's something here we call an impression or an audience or a unique or whatever, and we agree to these ins and outs, garbage in, garbage out. This is the audience we're delivering. But what you really care about is the thing that happens after that. Well, not for all brands, but for performance ones or ones where you have a higher metric. So it could be a conversion, a sales, a complete, whatever it is. The question I have for you is, once you do that, doesn't the other thing become irrelevant? The audience impression part, because now you're posting and delivering on the result.
Most definitely. You know, I think it again, our job is to deliver on whatever the brand's objectives happen to be. Those brand objectives have you know, because of technology and because of the fragmentation and because of you know, where audiences are viewing, there's more and more opportunities to use television like a digital asset in some cases, and there's opportunities for data-driven linear, which provides which provides the ability to optimize programs or networks or things like that, and clients are using their first-party data to enhance that. You know, Matt's presentation, you know, in terms of, you know, he's got a very small subset of folks that he wants to hit, and he's still hitting them with video, and it's not about it wasn't about the impression. It was about finding that audience and then targeting that audience and then being able to use some lower funnel metrics in the back end to push it forward. So the KPIs, you know, does one measurement work across everything? No, it depends on what you want to do. Most of the money is spent against reach, trying to reach in broad reach places. And if you think about broad reach in general, there are many brands that need it, and that's okay. There are brands that are ubiquitous across, you know, like Oreo. Like everybody's going to eat Oreos. So there are many brands that need it, and that would be nice to have in a measurement that goes across everything, like we've talked about. What defines a view? What defines an impression? Et cetera, et cetera. But the real dynamic piece is just about what you can do with video in other places using data and applying those things.
So now as we move more towards that, because you can do that with digital and OTT and connected TV, does it put pressure on linear TV to become more accountable for these higher order KPIs?
Not yet. Not, at least in my house, not yet. I think it's crawl, walk, run. People are just moving over. Even in data-driven linear, I was looking at my Viacom Vantage recap report, and 100% of the campaigns were on audience composition or reach in an actual data-driven linear campaign. So I think one day, yes, but I just don't think we're there yet. We're still shifting from GRP to target. But we still want to read out on our demos, and we still want to know everything about that first metric. So not yet. It's not a pressure cooker yet, because we're just inching our way towards even talking about that.
And sometimes scale becomes an issue as well. So in linear television right now, so we all know supply is, you know, moving and changing. Demand is pretty, you know, constant, if not growing in the space, which causes, you know, a lot of inflationary metrics there. And the challenge that we have is, you know, how do we find places to reach these audiences in a different manner? And the ability that, you know, like a Vantage or some of these other folks have, but our clients still, they're upholden to, I had 100 TRPs last year and this week, and I need 100 TRPs, otherwise my business isn't going to work.
Yes, that's the real compulsion, is that the audience is migrated to these platforms, and as good and stable as linear TV is, you just can't reach them. You have to move the money. But we have all these different methods and metrics for the going in. We have these higher order KPIs now coming out. You don't think we're really moving that direction. In the last few years, I've seen this crazy gold rush of TV attribution suppliers emerge, which makes my head hurt. It's ironic because the original models were TV regression models for a marketing mix. Then we went into digital, and then you saw all these attribution players emerge. Now they're coming for pure play TV attribution. Do you use those things? How do you use them? Do you have your own proprietary ways of?
We're still, I hate to say this, we're still a little test and learn with it. People pick the campaign they want, they pick the channel they want, they measure that channel. They try to optimize, but they don't really use it to do anything. Before I was agency side, I was actually client side, and we actually had a dedicated research budget with what was then called, actually it's still Marketing Evolution and Research Now, where we were just measuring everything. So when it actually comes to now being agency side, it's people are just picking one for one campaign and one channel and seeing how it did. And it's, you know, there's a few brands that are being affected by it. One of my big soft drink brands just did a whole ROI analysis and actionably changed their 2020 budgets based on it. But again, that's not even attribution, it's an ROI study. So they're interested, but not in a bigger way, at least at IPG.
Yeah, and I mean, what I've seen in generally the marketplace too is just the opportunity retailers have with their data to work with, you know, whatever CPG companies or other folks, and media companies a la Google, and you can see the Roundel/Disney, you know, partnership. Those I think are really interesting. Those are still in a very, very early test and learn phase. Walmart's been doing that type of stuff for a little while, but you know, until we can get to a point where you can actually see what your customer is buying, when they're buying, and what they viewed, or what you know, what media they've been a part of prior to, so we can start to model that and target that better. That's really the most interesting thing, I think, coming on the horizon from my perspective.
I think what's also hard is people are relying on the partners and publishers to bring the attribution relationships. So we've negotiated with all the broadcast networks that if you go into a data product, you'll get waived closed loop attribution. So it depends on who Viacom is using for sales lift, as opposed to as an agency team and a brand going directly to the research partner and having them holistically look at everything. So I think that is actually the biggest hurdle that we need to change.
Yeah, and then you have the other concern, which is sometimes the sales data is proprietary, and even your own clients don't want to share it with you.
Yeah.
So we have time for questions if anybody wants to dig into metrics or OTT. There's a chance back of the room. Again, the big money up here on stage, so.
Boy. Thank you. It's always Jesse from Forward PMX. It's always insightful hearing you guys. Thank you. Operational questions, easy ones for you, Julie. I wonder, one, within your organizations, you know, more and more media in general is moving programmatic, and I just wonder how you use programmatic as a tool within your day-to-days. It's kind of a series of questions, but answer it as one. I also am curious, can you give us a sense of the relative scale between advanced video practices relative to traditional within your organizations? And third is YouTube, advanced TV.
You want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I can. So I think in terms of scale, you know, generally the money's still on the linear side. It's you know, probably 85, 90%, 10%, but growing, and those are just latest numbers and figures that I've seen. In terms of programmatic and the opportunity to use programmatic for different KPIs, because whether or not some of the media is dynamic enough to use targeting doesn't mean you have to use those KPIs. And in fact, I do have a client that uses programmatic buying as part of their upfront. And we've figured out ways to model, you know, the impressions or TRPs or whatever measurement we're trying to use to deliver that. So there's opportunities, I think, in any format of buying that we try to do, as long as we can try to unify the measurement in some way that works for that particular client.
Yeah, so we just launched Kinesso, which is IPG Corporate's ad tech platform. So what that really is going to be doing is creating a programmatic marketplace that'll connect eventually to all types of deals, obviously it's digital first. But the reality is programmatic is used as a supplemental medium, at least in my shop, as you know. And the reality is what we're finding from an investment and a partnership standpoint is the only way to really effectively bring programmatic to the conversation and use it to benefit our programmatic teams is to create programmatic guarantees, which to investment people is direct IO. So we definitely giggle at IPG because that's funny because everyone tells us that everything's programmatic, but programmatic is just turning back into direct IO. So we're kind of just almost more merging the two worlds than making everything programmatic. I think we're creating something entirely different that is automated direct IOs, which isn't necessarily programmatic, and it's not necessarily traditional investment. So as programmatic is known today, we use it as a supplement and a way to, get those digital impressions out there based on IPs, and it's awesome. I wish I could just plug PMPs, and I really do. I think it's so nice, because we have to rely on third-party platforms and managed services. So hopefully IPG's investment in Kinesso is going to alleviate that. So it's definitely part of the conversation, but not at the forefront just yet. Oh, no, sorry, forgot. YouTube is not advanced TV. I mean, it's digital video. Their YouTube TV just isn't scalable to the point where it's something not to pay attention to. It's just part of our GP deal. Yeah. So it's a great video partner. We look at it, we refer to it as nonlinear alternatives, but it does not actually sit within OTT or advanced TV.
And YouTube TV, I mean, it's scaling as we speak. It's relatively new, but to your point, it sits within GP for now. But as that channel evolves, it will change.
Ask us next year.
This is Brendan. I'm Brendan Kelly from Premion. My question's about the silos at the agencies. So, going, we have a lot of CTV sellers in here. Where do you see the conversation going in terms of the teams, in terms of who owns these budgets? Who's is it the integrated planning side? I work a lot with the local TV side. They think they want to own the budget, but there is still some infighting, it seems, inside the agencies with the different, disciplines. How do you guys see that playing out the next couple of years?
I've heard the holding companies are about 50-50, which is really hard for partners. That OTT sits in half of the holding companies as a digital programmatic means, and half of the holding companies, I think ours, with integrated video investment teams. I think we both agree. The people who have it at digital teams will eventually put it in their integrated investment teams. But that's where the money is for us. I mean, if we're 90-10 linear to digital, and you want money and you want volume, well, you got to crack at the 90. And the only way to do it is to attack an integrated investment video team. So that's how it works at us. I think you're pretty similar.
And we're very similar. In fact, at Spark, what we've done is we've also gotten rid of what we call quote-unquote digital teams. So because having a digital team, in theory, assumes that people who aren't on that team are not digitally oriented or digitally savvy. So we set up our investment group in terms of 4 broad pillars. We'll probably even frankly bring it down to 3, but it's really simple. It's national, local, and content, and precision. Precision, though, as a 4th pillar, probably should roll under everything else and underpin everything else we do. And we expect our investment leads to be able to think holistically across the marketplace, not just even from a national perspective, but understand local and content so that they become more marketplace strategists versus media buyers.
I have a
Okay.
question. Oh, sorry, Joe.
Go ahead.
I'm with LiveRamp. My name is Gayatri. Out of curiosity, you mentioned that clients are asking you about, what were our TRPs at this week last year, and people are sort of looking back at more traditional metrics and holding you accountable to those types of metrics as opposed to shifting the conversation to the more lower stream metrics. Are you hearing at all from your clients and brands wondering about efficiency in what they're doing and oversaturation? Are people beginning to ask those questions, or are they still with the mindset of what was my reach compared to last year?
I mean, many clients are still focused on, unfortunately, what was my reach from last year. There's a lot of legacy TV, or measurement in the marketplace, particularly things like MMM, where, you know, MMM, we've spoken about this, I think, a little bit too. It's hard to, I got the light, but MMM is really two simple things. It's about media efficiency and it's about creative effectiveness. And until, you know, that's where if you think about consistent measurement and thinking, you know, cross-channel, like I was talking to the Dish folks about their reach CPM. I thought that was kind of an interesting concept to start to try to level things off, because reach seems to be you know, a common currency in that space. But CMOs are going to have a very hard time taking risks like this, particularly like if you're a retail CMO and you're buying 1,000 TRPs in you know, the week of Black Friday, and you decide, you know what, I'm going to push some of it over here, I'm going to raise my cost here, but it's going to be quote unquote more effective. And if you don't make sales, and they do their weekly sales meetings on Monday, if you don't make sales, that person's not going to have a job in a couple of weeks. And that's why there has to be, it's a slow roll. There's a lot of legacy in that kind of space in terms of just how things are measured and what we want to do going forward. But yeah, it's a challenge because of, you know, many clients' infrastructures and how we are able to kind of help them navigate that infrastructure to prove out that this media is actually more effective, that it's going to drive sales, and you migrate there and in a kind of a slow roll.
Yeah, so if I could distill this down to a couple of takeaways. One is that, you know, it is very much about the higher order KPIs. You know, it was interesting yesterday at the IAB and the PwC released their internet ad spending for the first half, and there was a shift more towards performance-based models away from brand-based. So, you know, the world can accommodate every kind of marketer and KPI. But the other interesting part was they had Brian Weiser from Group M in the briefing, and they were asking him, like, why there isn't more movement of TV money into this. And, you know, he said, frankly, you know, that there's a belief system built around Nielsen that the audience metrics of OTT and they couldn't even agree what connected TV was by definition, that there is no standard for that. And, you know, with respect to Roku and DataZoo and other players, you know, you have a currency. So the other point I would take away is I think from listening to you, we're very much like the way we were with cable or syndication, which is they require different ways of measurement, you know, a gross average audience rating for syndication or whatever. It's the same thing today with OTT. The difference is you don't have Nielsen, and I'm not a Nielsen champion by any stretch of the means, but you don't have that industry standard, that currency that we could all rally around and say that's gold. And the last point, and this leads to the question, is so last week Dave Morgan, one of our columnists, wrote a column for us asking if 22% of your Nielsen panel were robots or, you know, sophisticated invalid traffic. Would you be cool with that? So why are you cool with that when you move over to this nonlinear side?
What we're cool with as people, like I always, you probably say the same, we're people for the people. So we're not cool with that, but if our client is, we're in the client service industry, so if the client does not care and the client wants Nielsen, we will create partnerships and strategies that enable them to buy however they want. So we have some outcome-based, and you know, so we're not cool with it.
Right, and I mean, fraud is fraud no matter which way you think about it and whichever side of the fence it's on. Being transparent about it and making sure our clients understand what part is and what part isn't, and going into something eyes wide open is what's important, I think. Yeah.
All right, any other questions?
I actually was wondering,
Oh.
just listening to you guys, and just it still seems a lot of, you know, trying to figure out and not knowing, you know, how to measure the success in terms of each individual platform, which is making it all more fragmented. Does it make sense then, or are even your clients okay to this, to measure things incrementally and sort of see how it's doing overall, or do you really need to get those specifics for each particular platform or channel or whatever you're using?
Yeah, I think we make it more complicated than it really is. I mean, it's fragmented, but you could also just go to Roku and buy it all. You can buy Roku, you can buy Amazon's. So it's fragmented, but from our side, it's actually quite simple, and we definitely compartmentalize it People are measuring fine. They're using Nielsen DAR. DAR will be integrated into Amazon end of this year, Samsung into next year. That's pretty much 70% of the ecosystem right there. So, you know, they're doing what they can, and they're holistically measuring what they want to. They'll do channel-based, and that's fine because they're still learning about allocations even just within the channels. So even if they're doing OTT on its own, they're still learning about which partners, if it's a platform or a Roku or a Pluto, where that dollar within the channel should go. So there is not a gold standard, but there definitely is a good for now for people to figure out how they want to move forward.
Brad, it struck me when you said it early on that it's an exciting time for media, and where everyone were talking about how it's confusing and it's, you know, a headache. But here you are, are you a masochist or?
No. I mean, it's a challenge. Who doesn't like a challenge? One, two. You're finally seeing, you know, particularly in that you know, CTV or landscape. Just, you know, I mean, this gets on a whole other topic, but the Disney Plus and the NBCs and all these streaming services are coming out, and how that's going to manifest itself, and SVOD versus AVOD, and it's you know, I've been doing this a little while, and you know, we've talked about migration, and it's never felt as scalable as it's starting to feel, and that's why I think it's an exciting time. There's definitely challenges. That's why we're all here. We can debate, we can share resources, and talk to each other about the best ways to kind of move forward. But that's why it's an exciting time.
It's also cyclical. I mean,
Yes.
I clearly wasn't there for it. I don't have a beard to show, but when cable came out of broadcast, eyeballs went there, and the reason nobody really freaked out was because it was still TV.
Yeah,
It just happens to be a new medium.
It took some researchers like Walter Reichel, Ted Bates to come up with a 5% solution to give clients the confidence to put budgets there.
Right.
And it bared out.
I remember, you know, just coverage and cable. And
Yeah, it was crazy like it was now, but,
Totally.
you know.
But it's at least still all TV there.
Okay, but if you don't mind, I'd like to end with one question, which is, in a way, this is kind of the testament of the power of branding. It's the thing I've followed with Nielsen most closely over the years, that the industry really wants simplicity and ease of choice. And just like Kellogg's in the supermarket aisle, Nielsen is a, you know, cut to the chase currency. So when they put that on top of DAR, you guys went with Nielsen, and ComScore is the outlier. So it's the reason we use Google, Facebook for audience reach, even though you don't know what's going on behind the scenes, because Google and Facebook are now that branded currency for you. So is that what's going to happen? Roku is now going to become the branded currency because it's ease of use. You said it yourself.
I don't think it'll be the branded currency, though. I just think it'll get a lion's share of the OTT investment. But I don't think it's going to be a brand. There's just no way with Amazon already in the game, Roku's going to become the branded currency. I just think it's going to be a much larger player, and they're going to have a much larger data set to use. But I don't think it's going to Google the OTT world.
Who is Amazon going to buy?
Who's Amazon going to buy? They already have a DSP.
Yeah, but they'll just roll everybody up because they have trillions of dollars. So
Right.
who's next?
Yeah. You never know.
They can't buy Axiom.
No,
By the way,
but they already have a DSP. They don't need one. They did it already.
I think it's hilarious that you spent $3 billion and you use Excel spreadsheets. How many people in this audience know what Excel is?
We built the Excel spreadsheet the year before we bought Axiom. I just want to say
I
that.
appreciate you.
Anyway,
And Brad doesn't have one.
No, I don't even have one.
do you have a slide rule?
I'm sorry?
Do you have a slide rule?
I do have a slide
okay.
rule, and I've got an old calculator, too.
The more things change, the more they remain the same. And I have a feeling we'll be having the same conversation 5 years from now, but it'll be called something else. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.